Hey, it's Glassbox here, and today we are going to look at resolving conflicts for Git. We're going to look at what conflicts are and how they come about, and we're going to see how someone would go ahead and resolve that conflict. So really quickly, if you want to follow the text tutorial instead of the video tutorial, then you can do so by just coming to the testroom.com and looking for the Git tutorial, and it should be listed there, or alternatively just search for Git Conflict. So let's begin the tutorial. So first of all, what is a conflict and how does it occur? So far we've looked at how to merge files, we've looked at how to get multiple versions of a file, and we've also touched on the concept of having multiple people working on the same file. But here's the problem. What happens when you have two people working on the same file but in different branches, and at some point they want to merge the changes in? What a conflict is that it is the concept of having multiple versions of the same file, which when you try to merge, Git gets confused as to which version you're trying to merge. It's almost like saying you have a base version and someone takes a copy of that base version, let's just say person A, and then person B also takes a copy of the base version. At some point they make their changes and they want to merge in their changes from their branch into the base version, into the base branch. When the first person merges the changes in, it's fine, because as far as Git can see, these are two different changes, so it just applies one update on top of the top. But when the second person tries to merge in their changes, it sees that the base version copied in person B's branch is different to the current base branch, because person A from branch A made the changes. So this is kind of confusing to explain in simple language. So what I'm going to do is actually create a scenario where we will end up with a conflict, and then I'll show you how to resolve the conflict. So let's begin. The first thing we're going to do is, because we don't want to pollute our master branch, we're just going to create a different branch. So let's go ahead and do something like git checkout -b, and let's call this conflict branch. Okay, so now we're on a branch called conflict branch, and let's go ahead and just open a text file. Doesn't matter. Okay, so we'll use this text file. So we will use this particular test file, test01, as a file on which we will eventually end up with a conflict. So to do this, what we're going to do is create two different branches based off the conflict branch. So we're just going to say git branch conflict branch 01, and we're going to do the same thing, but this time call it 02. So now if we do git branch, we can see that there are basically three branches. There is a conflict branch, which is basically a copy of master, and then we have a conflict branch 01 and a conflict branch 02, which are essentially a copy of conflict branch, which is by definition a copy of master. So in other words, all these three branches are identical to master. But to make life easier, we're just going to say that these two branches are, let's call them child branches of this conflict branch. So the first thing we're going to do is check out this branch here and actually make a change to that test01 file. Okay, so like we said, we have this file here. So this is the version of the file as it currently stands on conflict branch. But what we're going to do is, currently we are on conflict branch 01. So this is now the version on conflict branch 01. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some changes here so that the version on branch 01 becomes different to the base branch. So let's go ahead and just simply say something like branch 01 and save it, close it. Let's do a quick git status. So we can see that the file has definitely changed. So what we're going to do is basically add the file in and then commit it. Okay, now let's quickly review what we've done. We are now at a state where we are on conflict branch 01, and this branch is a copy of conflict branch. So what we want to do now is go back to conflict branch and merge in the changes from conflict branch 01. In fact, before we merge in, let's do a quick git log. So we can see that our most latest commit is this, adding new test03 file. Great. So now let's continue with our rebase. Okay, so now if we do a git log, we can see that the change from branch 01 has now been applied to the head of the conflict branch. Okay, great. So just to clean things up, now let's delete conflict branch 01. Okay, so now let's do a git branch. So now we can see that we currently have master, a conflict branch, and a conflict branch 02. We deleted conflict branch 01 because there's no need to have it. But let's review what we actually have. Although this was a copy of this branch is now basically a commit ahead of this. In other words, the test01 file version in this branch is now different to the test01 file in this branch. So when we make a change to say the same file on this branch and we try and merge it in, it will say the version you're trying to merge in for that given file has now changed because someone else has made a change to that same file and added something in. What do you want to do? So let's go ahead and actually see that in action. So we're going to check out the branch first. We are on conflict branch 02. We're going to go ahead and make a change to that file. So remember, now that we're on branch 2, this is now essentially got a copy of the version that was originally on conflict branch. In other words, it won't have the change 01 text that we added in. So this time we will say change on conflict branch 02. So let's save that and close it. So let's do a quick git status, and we can see that the file has changed. Again, do the same thing. We're going to add it. Oh, okay, and now we're going to commit that file. Okay, so what do we have now? If we do a git log on conflict branch 02, we can see that this log is from the original copy of conflict branch, and this log is from the change that we've just made to branch 02. And notice that change from branch 01 isn't in here because it wouldn't be. That happened on a completely different branch. So now if we try to check out conflict branch, and now if we try to do a git rebase, it basically says, hold on, what you're trying to do is merge in a change to this particular file, but Git can't do it. And the reason is there was a change made to this file already. So let me try and explain again, because this is really confusing. What's basically happened is this. Once upon a time, there was a particular version of this file on our conflict branch. For some particular reason, 2 more branches were created of that same copy of the file. When the copies were created, everything was fine. All 3 copies were identical to each other. But at some point, one of the copies changed on one of the branch, which then got merged in. Now, the other branch, which still had the original version of that given file, was also changed to something else. So when the first person tried to merge in their changes, it was all fine, no problem. But when the second person tried to merge in their changes, Git was basically saying, I can't merge in your changes because someone else has already changed something on that same file. In particular, what this is complaining about is saying someone else has actually made a change on that specific line on that file that you have changed. And because there are now 2 different versions of the same file, and to be more specific, of that same line of text, Git is unable to recognize which change to actually keep. It can establish that there are definitely changes, but what Git can't do is make a logical decision for you. It can't say whether to keep something or whether to remove something. So now notice that we are still on the conflict branch, but we are in a rebase state. So if we go ahead and open up that file, you will notice that the file has actually changed. What this is saying is this is the current version on the conflict branch. And this is the version that you're trying to merge in. Another way to think of it is Git is basically saying you are trying to overwrite this line here using that line over there. But the reason Git is complaining is because this line didn't originally exist when you made the copy of the file. So this is the distinction to understand here. The reason it's complaining is because this line that you're trying to change did not originally exist. Previously it looked like that. Had it been that, Git would have just said, fine, it's an overwrite of one file. But because it looks like this, Git is saying that your change is basically trying to overwrite someone else's change, not the base copy. So I hope that part makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know and I'll try and explain it again as best I can. But this is what conflicts are. Conflicts are when you try to make a change to something which has also been changed by someone else. Conflicts do not occur when you make a change to a file where the copy of that file has not changed from the point in time where you created the branch. Conflicts only occur when you try to change something which has also been changed by someone else, which has effectively changed the base copy of the file at the point of time when you cloned or when you created the branch. Anyway, so once you've wrapped your head around that, some really quick syntax stuff. These greater than and less than arrow signs and these equal signs is Git's way of saying everything above the equal signs and under the arrow signs where it says head is basically Git saying this is what you're trying to change. This is what your merge is trying to do. And everything below the equal signs but above the actual commit from the change that was done by someone else is basically Git saying this is what's currently on the existing branch. So what Git is basically saying is it wants you to pick one, and once you've picked one, push in your change. Although we did make a change that we want, Let's just say, we pick one. In this instance, I'm going to pick the existing change because strictly speaking, the change isn't actually substantially big. I am deciding to keep this change in. So to keep this change in, all we need to do is actually remove the unwanted text. In this case, there is everything between the equals and the head, which is that, and then finally this line here. So now this file basically looks identical to the version that was committed on conflict branch 01. So we're going to save that. So now if we do a git status, you will notice that it's saying that the file has now been modified. So now that we've changed the file, one would assume that you obviously need to add the file in. But here's the thing, we are currently on a rebase. So technically speaking, we don't need to add in anything. This is basically telling us that you are in the middle of a rebase, i.e. you're trying to merge two branches together, which for some reason you aren't able to. This is also telling us that once you've resolved your conflicts, all you have to do is run a special command which allows Git to understand that you have fixed everything that you need to fix, and it goes ahead and tries to complete the rebase. The command we need to run is git rebase, which is identical to the previous time we run it, if you look here. But this time, instead of supplying the branch name, all we're going to say is -- continue. Okay. So it looks like Git says we have to actually add in the file before we can do the continue. Okay, that's fine. We'll just do git add and then git rebase continue. And now it's saying that it has applied the changes to the file. So really quickly, let's do a git status. Now, if everything's worked out fine, this should say that the working directory is clean. And it is. So if we do a git log, we should see that the change from our second branch is in, as well as branch 1. The reason is because, remember, we did actually tell Git to merge in changes from this particular branch or change to this file. But when it had a conflict, all it ended up doing was basically rearranging the commits, which also meant rearranging the changes. So what's actually happened is this change was actually committed, but then because we picked this particular change here, this was rewritten on top. So this is part of the caveat of understanding how conflicts work. So in this video, we've looked at how to create a conflict, although you probably wouldn't want to in real life because it creates a whole lot of problems. But we had to create a conflict to see how a conflict can actually occur. And then we looked at how to resolve a conflict. And once we looked at how to resolve a conflict, we also confirmed to see whether the changes were actually implemented or not. In this particular project, we only changed one file. So, changing one file wasn't too big of a headache. But when you work on big projects and you see conflicts of a number of files, we're not saying one or two, we're talking 10, 20 different files all at the same time, because multiple people have been putting in changes from multiple different branches. It becomes very difficult to try and figure out which version to keep. In our case, it was simply a single line of text. But what if this wasn't the case? What if there were, methods, algorithms, multiple different files? It becomes very tricky to figure out which change to keep and which change to overwrite. This particular video was somewhat difficult to go through because it's very difficult to explain how a conflict is resolved. It's easy to explain what a conflict is, but it's difficult to kind of try and establish when a conflict happens, why it happens. So I hope I've been able to convey that with some logical meaning. Hopefully this won't be too difficult to follow, and if you did find it a bit difficult, just leave something in the comments below and I'll try to address it. And alternatively, you could read the online text tutorial instead, and that may make things a little bit more clearer and easier to understand. Thanks a lot for watching. Until next time, ciao. Hi guys, it's Glassboxed here, and I really appreciate you guys watching my video. And if you've liked it, then give it a thumbs up. If you already haven't, hit the subscribe button below to stay up to date with my latest video releases covering all aspects of technical testing. Also, follow me on Twitter and Google, links in the description below. Until next time, ciao.